This afternoon, we are going to hear a story about a teacher many of us knew much later than this story happened, and doesn't quite fit the picture of the person we knew as a first and second grade teacher. At least I don't think it does.
No, not really. Or it might explain why she's a teacher.
Yes, that could be.
Yep.
So Dawn Staples Knox is Mabel Staples' granddaughter, one of her granddaughters, other one right here. And she has an interesting story to tell about Mabel going west at a time when it was not that easy to do. And we're not talking back to covered wagon days.
No.
Yeah, okay, I was going to say, make sure you.
Yes.
Oh, there is, she's right there.
Yes, okay. Well, I don't have to introduce myself. Thank you, Kathy. I am a lifelong resident of Stockton Springs. And I am very proud to say that I am sixth generation, along with my sister, that owns the Staples homestead. And currently, one of the seventh generations is living in that building. So, just a little family history.
Good for us.
So this presentation is coast to coast, and it started a couple of people I want to thank that helped me with this. Andrea Frazier, who is a cousin, I'm not sure what number it is, but she asked me one time if I saw this article about Grammy's trip west. And I'm like, I know about the trip a little bit west, but I never knew there was a newspaper article. So I got that, and that was very interesting, and that started triggering, like, well, tell me more. So Vanessa Arsenal, right over here, is our first cousin once removed. She's Basil's first cousin, and her mom and our grandmother were sisters. And the story revolves around both girls. And also, Diane, third cousin once removed, had lots of family information, especially who married who. I have this all written down somewhere. And that was very helpful because the story kind of like wraps in there. And then last off, my grandmother, Mable Dunaver Staples, who was incredibly resilient. And she was a dedicated teacher and also an awesome granny. And I have my cheat sheets. I'm not probably going to use them. So this story is about Mabel, who's our grandmother, and Edry, who is Vanessa's mom. And they traveled with their aunt and uncle. And this newspaper article, this is actually a print of it, or part of it, was printed in August of 1922, and it's only about the return trip. So after reading this article, it was the return trip, I had more questions than anything after reading it. It's like, why did this happen? Why did they do that? Who did this? And all that. But also, my first impression of reading the article was it wasn't ringing true to me. I don't want to call them liars, because I don't think they were, but some of it didn't seem really accurate, and a lot of it seemed very misleading. And I knew there was more to the story, so this is my attempt to try to pull that together. That's nobody in the family. I just thought that was a cool picture of what the vehicle might have looked like at that time and traveling across country and that. So my first question, my whole slideshow is basically questions, but why go to California in the first place? Was it to find a job, to make a better life, the sunshine? What's the reason for going? And what I did know, basically because the 1920 census helped me figure this out, is that she went with the Kimball family. There were three families from Stockton, the Bennetts, the Bishops, and the Kimballs. And Vanessa had a picture, and that is the aunt and that is Mrs. Bishop. So we have documentation they were actually there. And so Mabel went with the family with the understanding that she was going to help take care of the kids and go to school. There were 4 children, all under the age of 5, in that Kimball family. And I'm not sure exactly what year she went. I think it's right around 1918. She would have been 13 or 14 years old. And again, why did she go by herself with the family? Was she told to go? Was she invited to go? You know, those things, we need her to answer that. So anyways, Uncle Howard and Aunt Code and Edry went west in the fall of 1920. And they went to the Los Angeles area. Lindsay, California and Los Angeles are about 170 miles apart. So even though they went out 2 years later, they weren't on the same farm. And the only reason I put this little slide in here, 1920, is because when I looked on the census, like the page before, the page that they were on, and the page after, I looked at like where everybody was born. And there were very few people in the neighborhood that were from California. They were from places like Arkansas and Indiana and Germany, and so it made me feel like there were a lot of people going to California in the 20s. I'm sure there's history out there, I just haven't read that stuff, but I always heard they went for the gold rush, not to pick oranges or work on olive farms. So I thought that gave me a little more evidence.
Kind of a trend.
So this, what about family background? I know a lot about Stapleses, but I didn't know as much about the Dunavers and the Littlefields. And between Vanessa and Diane and my dad and some of my grandmother's notes, kind of pieced a few things together. And so this is Mabel, this is Edry, this is Dora, and this is Dexter. So they were a family of 4 kids. And in the town of Stockton at the time, Diane can probably correct me on this, but there was a bunch of Littlefields and a bunch of Dunavers. And 4 of the Dunavers married 4 of the Littlefields. And it wasn't like all the boys married all the girls, it was like some of the boys and some of the girls married some of the boys and some of the girls. So, their parents were George Dunaver and Martha Littlefield. And in 1913, she was 9, she was 6, she was 7, and he was 3. The mom died, Martha died. So the kids and George, what he ended up doing was he gave up custody of the 3 girls. Again, I have a question like why? And why keep the boy? He couldn't afford to keep them. Okay, thank you, Diane. I didn't know that one.
But he could keep a 3-year-old boy?
Yeah.
Well, the only thing I can think of is that, like the 3-year-old boy might have been easier to handle or whatever. I don't know. But anyways,
Potential
so
worker. Potential worker. Right.
Yep.
Anyway,
look to the next one, please. So what did I learn about Uncle Howard and Aunt Code? Well, at the time in 1913, he was 39 and she was 36. And he did not want to have children. That was expressed to me from Vanessa, she knew that. And so that kind of makes sense. And they took, not the 2 oldest girls, but they took Edry and they took Mabel. And one of the other girls, Dora, went with Lou Dunaver, the sister. Not that that's bad. Some of this might be opinions, but what I kind of got from talking to people was that he was strict. He was a little on the arrogant side. He was mechanically inclined, and a big deal that he was the first to own a Dodge touring car in Stockton Springs. They made a big deal of it in the newspaper article. And Aunt Code, her name was actually Flora, but everything I ever find a picture on, it's Code. I don't know why. But Aunt Code was a kind, warm person and possibly meek. I don't know, maybe I'm interpreting it from some of the stuff, but anyways, this was the car that he had. It was a 1918 Dodge touring car. So that got me on the thinking of, well, if the Kimballs and all these other people went west, did they go west on a train? Did they go west on Model Ts? Why is the Dodge so interesting? So I did a little research on that on the side. And apparently, there were two brothers in the Dodge Dodge car making that were building Model Ts for a while, and then they got fed up with him, and they started their own business, and they wanted to make it a better vehicle. So I don't know all the things about cars, and I could probably fascinate you with all kinds of details about why the Dodge touring car was better than the Model T. But basically what I got out of it in language that I could understand is it was a heavier vehicle, it had a bigger motor, electric start, those kinds of things. And there were several articles that I read that that stated that. It wasn't just one person's opinion. And so in their advertisements, they used the word dependability. Which seems like a word that we all use. It was invented in their definition. It was never around before that. So it got added to the dictionary shortly after. And they had another one that speaks for itself. And I did find that in 1914 it cost $875, which was twice what it would be if you wanted a Model T. And there were things about the tires were better and clutches and things like that, but I couldn't understand it, so I just and they have a quote that they used to say in the newspapers, just think of all the Ford owners who someday want an automobile. And that was the Dodge boys. And the other thing that I thought was interesting is this is an Army one. And when George Patton was a lieutenant and he was chasing after Pancho Villa, you say it right? Villa.
Okay.
He had a Dodge touring vehicle. And then he later stated that in World War I, he preferred the Dodge. So that was free advertisement for those guys. So it was a big deal. A Dodge is better than a regular car that everybody else could probably afford. I don't know if these aren't like quotes like they said, anybody said this, but the newspaper guy said these things. And I put direct quotes in. And a lot of it stood out like it wasn't ringing true or there was something about it. So they said due to the dependable automobiles and improved roads, there are few people who have not dreamed of coast-to-coast tour. I'm not sure when the cars came out that people did want to go to cross country in a vehicle. Think about the roads, the lack of highways, the lack of hotels. But then they said the practice by no means is commonplace, okay. And then this is where I get that I kind of feel Howard was a little on the tooting his own horn or arrogant, but for an infinite number, fortunately situated, such dreams have come true. Mr. Littlefield holds the distinction of being the first resident of this town to undertake the noteworthy journey. Well, la-dee-da. That's all that's what's in my head when I'm reading it. It's like, okay.
That was he's the one who said infinite instead of finite number?
Yeah.
It's
I don't know if he did.
No, I think
that was from the article.
That's the journalist.
That's
You're
yeah.
quoting the journalist.
Yeah. Okay. And then this one's really good, and I hope it doesn't offend any of you, but a month of driving enriched their lives with wealth of scenes, experiences, and varied incident, such as many never come to average mortals in the year of the humdrum existence. So apparently if you didn't travel, you're a pretty boring Joe. And then another one, eventually they will go back. They have the ineradicable virus in their blood and are doomed to return to California or always endure the longing to do so. I know for a fact my grandmother said, I asked her about travel when I was a teenager, and she's like, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to go anywhere. I want to stay home. I love my home. And I remember that conversation. And then the last one really gets me. The party arrived in good condition. although Mr. Littlefield found himself somewhat weary with the constant driving without anyone to spell him for a while at the wheel. Boo-hoo. In 1900, the first woman was given a driver's license. This is 1922. And in 1909, a woman named, I think it's, Ramsey's her last name, Alice Ramsey, drove across this country in an automobile. And she took train back, but, so why didn't he ask, at least Edry was 15, so okay, not her. But Mabel was 18, and Code was 42, or something like that. Why couldn't they drive in the plains, the prairies where it's flat and it's forever?
Because they didn't think that they were smart enough.
Apparently not, apparently
And
not.
you're also talking about before 1920 when women's rights came in.
Yes, I did look that up,
Well,
yeah,
they were allowed to vote, but not drive.
barely.
1920.
Yeah.
they were.
This is 2 years later. But you know what? If you're weary and tired, you don't let somebody drive it across. I mean, they let people drive in the hayfields without, But anyways, but this one rings true to me that somebody in the family might have said this. That they were glad to be back with the finest air in all the world. That sounds like somebody from Stockton would say that.
Saltwater air.
Saltwater air. Yeah, we can add that.
The air is different here.
Yes.
I traveled a lot.
Yes.
It's just,
Not
it's
today.
better.
Yeah, maybe not today, right?
It's still better.
Okay. So what happened in California and why did they return home? Because you got to remember, Mabel went out by herself, and then 2 years later or 3 years later, the rest of them came out. So why did they all pack up and leave? Well, according to the article, it's really hard to read because it's sort of like they're skirting around something. But basically they said there was a freeze, disastrous freeze, and also that the family didn't like the heat. They were in the San Joaquin Valley, and it was, that's Southern California, very hot in the summers. So that was pretty much their reason for why they packed up and left. But according to my grandmother, who told my mother this, because she didn't talk about this stuff to the rest of us, but she said they did not let her attend school, that she was out there and forced to work at 14 years old and not allowed to go to school at all. And it was an orange ranch that she was on, and Edry and the aunt and uncle were on an olive farm for a while, and then they joined them here. And she told my mom that she felt she was rescued, even though it took them 2 years, probably to make enough money to travel back home. But I thought that was pretty significant. For a woman who is an educator for all of her working life, to be denied her education, that's a no-no in our family. Okay. So this is a picture that I love. My sister says that's me. I've been told I look a lot like Mabel. But anyways, this was their car all loaded up. And what they have here is it's a little holder, and they have a tent, and they have cots. And the whole idea was you took this big tent and you threw it over the car, and you had a tent on one side and the car was underneath it. The seat in the car would fold down, so the girls would sleep in the car, and then the aunt and uncle would sleep on the cots under there. This is not them. They don't look very happy. But I found this, I was researching, I wanted to know, how did that tent look? What was the whole point of doing that? And got an advertisement where you can buy a tent, and this is kind of how the setup. They've got their stove over here, and a pot, and gear everywhere on the car. And what they called that was in the 20s when people were traveling, they called it overlanding. Because your vehicle was not just a mode of transportation, it also was your hotel accommodations. People could not rely on, there weren't motor inns, there might have been a few, but not like, we go down the highway now and there's, all kinds of places to stay, and same thing with diners. So in the article they mentioned about they traveled for a few hours, but not like we would do, like we'd go 8 hours or something for things. They had to set up the camp, they had to cook, and then also Uncle Howard, you saw him in the earlier picture with the overalls on. He had to keep fine-tuning the car and, fixing tires and stuff like that. So anyways, I wanted to give you a visual of that. What did they see on their way home? That was, you might recognize that. Green Canyon. I was gonna make it like
Sorry.
that's all right. I was gonna make it like a test, like you had to. I've retired, so I don't have to give any tests now. So the next one was the Mojave Desert and Petrified Forest. This was crossing the Continental Divide. They saw Pikes Peak and, hang on.
Sorry.
Ocean to Ocean Highway is something that was known before, like Route 66. It was one of the big ones that went across Kansas and things like that, and then into Colorado. And then the prairies. See, she could have driven. Anybody could have driven in that stuff.
Where's the road though?
Well,
Yeah.
it's
I'm
right,
sure it's
right
there.
down here. Right
Yeah.
down here.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so what did the route look like based on the cities and towns mentioned in the article? So in a second, Andrea's going to stop the slideshow and go to,
I'll start
Yeah,
doing it now?
yeah, do it
just
now.
to make sure it
yeah, it
works.
should be up there,
Yeah.
and you should probably refresh it.
Yep.
Yeah, reload.
Okay, so
Yeah.
just take a second.
I added this because I wanted you to see what possibilities, like other members, if you want to do a slideshow, that you can do it on Google Earth. And this is going to take us to the town. So this is Fresno, where they started. And we don't have to spend a lot of time, but just
So we'll
kinda-
just start doing it.
just start doing it.
And if you look at the jig-jaggedy route.
And then
they've
they
got-
went to Bakersfield. They went to Barstow, which is in the Mojave Desert.
I mean, just look at the route.
And then they were at Williams, which is in Arizona. It's the gateway to the Grand Canyon. You go to the Grand Canyon, Magdalena, New Mexico. And this route could be because of the roads. Pikes Peak is there, Colorado Springs. Then they start coming across the prairies, Maryville in Kansas. And then they flip up to Omaha. I was thinking of you, Charlie, with Civil War things.
Iowa.
Davenport, Iowa, Cleveland, Buffalo,
Yeah. It's a lot of.
Newburyport,
What a route.
Yeah.
and then Stockton Springs, which the picture is actually Sandy Point. But the other thing that you can do when you're making these slideshows, you can literally go in and change the picture, and you can also change the wording. You don't have to just say history about that. You can say, my grandmother did this, or this was a battlefield that, somebody
How
blew
long
up.
did this take him if you said I?
To do this,
Yeah.
it would probably, to travel or just to make the slideshow?
No, to travel.
Oh, I'll get to that.
Okay.
Okay, so go to the next one. That's my favorite slide. So Google Earth pulls out, so you can see the purple path that they
Yeah.
followed. You can
Wow.
zoom in, or you can, make it a little smaller, Andrea, just for a second. Just a little more. I get Maine in there. There we go.
Okay,
There you go.
Nice.
See,
Okay.
you can pull that one way or the other. I mean, it's very cool.
Do you wanna do that?
Hop up.
You don't wanna do that?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna look at what were some of the events that they experienced. So, as they're coming across, they have a tent, okay, basically, and they have a car. And so they had sandstorms. We'll just go through these quickly. I don't like electrical storms in my house. I can't imagine being in a tent in a car on a prairie or something. hailstorms. They only had to ford one river. I didn't even know what that meant, and so I looked up fording a river, so I was like, holy crap, you have to drive your car across the river? Somewhere I missed that in history class.
You're so young.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Diane, I love you. They did cross the Rattan Pass, which I got cut off here. It's 8,790 feet in elevation. Yiza. So, what was the cost and the time for the trip? I put out the budget that they actually quoted in the paper. And half of the money that they spent was on gas and a few repair things. And their living expenses was only $21.88, so the total they spent was $120. That doesn't tell me much because I don't know what it was like living in the 1920s. So there's a website you can go to, you plop it in, it's called dollartime.com, and it will tell you what that was then to what it is valued now. So it would be like us spending $2,200 to come one way across the country, but
Just the gas.
look at the top, just the gas and a few food, because this is excluding what they brought with them. So I don't know how much flour they packed, but you can imagine beans and flour, biscuits, things like
And the
that.
tent and all the.
And the
everything
tent
else
and
that
all
they
that
brought,
stuff,
everything they
yeah.
brought with them.
So they actually took 29 days to come across. 27 of them they were on the road and traveling. They did take a 2-day vacation in the Grand Canyons. They traveled 4,217 miles. I checked with Google. They say if you started driving from Fresno to Stockton, it should take you 49 hours if you drive nonstop. They didn't do it that way. They averaged, I took the mileage and the days and figured they traveled about 150 miles a day. And I know for a fact that Dodge wouldn't go faster than 40, 45 miles an hour. So just calculating what hour, the time and everything, they were averaging 26 to 39 miles an hour. And one day they set a record, and it was 204 miles for that day.
That's as much as I want to do usually.
Yeah, that's true. We usually have to stop when we get to Augusta, but
And that's a good road.
so this photo, it's interesting, 3 of them are smiling, is the only photo I know of, and I think it's the only time on the planet that Grammy was wearing pants. That woman wore a dress all of her life. I don't ever remember her wearing pants. Now, maybe there was a time, but I don't. And Edry wore pants, though. She was more
When she
stylish.
got older,
Yeah, yeah. yeah.
Grammy would wear them, she would put them on to go to pick raspberries, and then
Yep.
she took them right off.
Yep.
She didn't wear
Yeah.
pants.
But this is their first day heading home.
Mabel.
Yeah.
The last one.
The last one on the right.
Yeah, this is Mabel.
Okay.
Looks like me.
And you saw a picture of you at that age.
Yeah,
You would see- you would see.
yeah. I don't look. I'm older now. I don't look like that.
Andrea looks like Edric.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what's the big takeaway from this story and my research? Despite having your mother die at 9, and your father, gives you up, basically. You're sent to California by your guardians, and you're denied an education. She endured, and she made the best of it. That was always her attitude. We're gonna make the best of it. Things happened to her, a lot worse things happened to her too, and she made the best of it. So when she came back, she was 18 years old, and she had no high school education. So she had to start high school at 18 and didn't graduate till she was 22 in 1926, which her younger sister Edry, 3 years younger, graduated in 1925, 1 year ahead of her.
Mabel graduated with my mother.
Yes, yes. And they went winters down to Agnes's. Yep. Because you couldn't the snow and everything. And the thing that I didn't know, which I was pleased to hear, was Edry encouraged her sister to join her at the Farmington Normal School and to have a career in education. I'm not sure Grammy would have done that. She might have, she might not have, but having a good relationship with your sister certainly, you know, especially when you're feeling behind and your younger sister's already graduating, it's got to been some stress there. Yep. So, this is a letter that my grandmother wrote in 1960. And I'll read it. Dear sirs and board members, and I have the handwritten copy, but it's so frail it's starting to fall apart, so I typed it for you guys. To date, there's been no change in the overcrowded conditions of my room. The room that is to be used as a classroom remains as it has been in the past. For 5 weeks, this is October 5th, she wrote this. For 5 weeks, I have worked with 47 children. She only ever worked with first grade and second grade. 47 children. I can no longer do this. If something is not done by Monday, October 10th, I shall not report to work. I fear for my health if I continue. I do not feel in my heart that I am doing or able to do justice to the children in my class. Very truly yours, Mabel Staples. I don't know if we had a union at that time. I suspect we didn't. I don't think so. I think that was later years. But think about the courage, the bravery, the dedication it takes to, as a woman in the early 60s, to write a letter to the superintendent and all 4 board members and say, I'm not showing up to work.
How old was she then?
She was 56. Yep. And she retired in 69, so, you know.
They did something.
She'd been teaching for a long time, so she was tired too. But the fact is that they did do something. In 1960, they split that class. And I think, I need to have somebody from the class to confirm it, but I believe my grandmother started teaching. I mean, my mother went in and took that second grade out of the first, second grade combination. I think if I check with Skeet, because I think Skeet was Mom's first class. But anyways.
She was definitely teaching when I was in 7th or 8th grade.
Yep.
Teaching the second grade class.
She
there.
retired in 69, yeah, so.
Yep. So, very proud of her. And this is my favorite photo of Mabel and Edry, and that they stayed close their whole life. I was going to put, this was going to be where they taught, oh, I can say this because I haven't said it. She taught 47 years, Grammy taught 28 years, and so the 2 of them gave 75 years of their life to the world of education. Pretty, from a family that, you know, had a rough start. And then the last one, most people, most people that are residents of Stockton or grew up in the Stockton Elementary know this lady as Mrs. Staples, but to us, she's just Grammy.
That's a nice picture.
That is my favorite picture of her. And she thought I was just taking pictures of the plant. And I was not just taking pictures of the plant. I had this all. So, thank you very much for listening. And I didn't have to use my notes very often, so that's good.
Nice.
Very sweet. Great.
Yeah, I think at the time she wrote that letter, we were still having a superintendent who did Winniport, Frankfort, Stockton.
Wouldn't be a bit surprised.
Because we have some of the town records from Angus Holmes.
Yep.
Time as a town, I guess selectman or treasurer.
Yep.
And they say what percentage we have to pay the superintendent. Because we are not a union, we are not a school district, and the superintendent was for several different places.
When did we combine with years, but when did 56
It-
become, it was in the,
It was in the early 60s.
Okay, my class was the
Because
last class to
that
graduate
graduated from
in
Stockton.
Stockton. I went
What
my
year
whole
was-
12 years
Yes,
in that
Stockton.
one school.
Right.
And Mr. O'Neill was the principal
What year?
and coach,
What year did you-
61.
61, okay, so it was after that,
Yeah.
because I,
So 62, they would have had a new
they started the
everything.
district.
yeah.
I don't know that when we were district, I think we started
Yeah.
first
Second
as
school year.
tuition students to
We
the high
tuitioned
school.
our high school kids a lot.
Yeah.
How old was Mabel when she passed away?
80, I want to say 83, but I'm not sure about that.
And what about Mabry?
Ebry was 90.
She died in
93.
No,
So if she died in 94, she would have been 90.
no, she died in end of 92, right? And Lucy was born in 93.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so she was 88.
88?
88. She was 88. Dad was 83.
And Mother lives to be 96.
And,
Yes.
and her
But they
sister
were
was
both
96.
Very strong individuals.
Yes,
They
they
were,
were.
yes.
Very
both of them.
independent.
I would
Yes.
say that definitely of Mabel.
Yeah. It is.
Yeah, both of them.
Yeah.
Both
She
of
was
them,
just
yes.
the same.
Did they have a relationship with her father?
They did. Vanessa has quite a few pictures, and I have copies of them. That later in life, they
Yeah.
were very close to their dad. And Edry was, I don't know if she was more able to or she wanted to, but she helped take care of Howard, Uncle Howard, and for a while.
Yeah,
And
she started, her father stayed with us for a few years.
yeah,
Right.
And then Uncle Howard, Aunt Cody had died and he needed a place. So my folks said, well, come on over, we can both stay here. But they never got along, those two. So
and I'm not surprised, knowing what we know.
So my grandfather moved out and he lived with some woman in town who took care of elderly
Yeah.
people. And Uncle Howard stayed on with us. And he was a rather, I don't know how you describe him. Of course, I'd heard that he didn't like children and that kind of set me off a little bit. And I said, it was my job to set the table with silverware, plates and dinner. Everybody else in the family had matching silverware, but I made his different. He was not a part of the family as far as I could say. Nobody else noticed it. It didn't matter, but I
Runs in
knew
the
it.
family, whether it's this side of the river or the other side.
Yeah.
What happened to the brother?
Oh, the
He died
brother,
then?
he died at, he was 20 years
My
old.
mother was
Oh,
a
wow.
He had tuberculosis, I believe.
Yeah.
He also never attended school, so I wonder if there was something
Well, we're
Sickly
back.
anyway.
sickly about him.
Shannon,
Yeah.
great,
That may have been
great
why the dad kept him too.
they
And
had
Dora went
kids
with
first side,
George's
my
sister,
side.
and they lost track. They moved away, and she married some guy that was, pretty heavy into the alcohol. They just kind of drifted apart, and then she died of breast cancer, right?
Yeah, breast cancer.
Yeah.
And she had 12 kids.
Yeah.
10 of them lived.
Yeah.
They were in Massachusetts.
Yep.
And when she found out that she was dying, because her husband was an alcoholic, she contacted, whatever.
Like DHS.
Equivalent at the
Yeah,
time.
it's like
At
that.
the
Yeah,
time.
whatever, at the time, and asked them to take the children. And I think she said the 3 oldest ones could stay at home and they reared the baby.
Yep. And the rest of them she gave away.
And somewhere I have a list of all those.
Yep. Yep.
But Mabel kept in contact.
Yes, she
with
did.
the-
Yep.
with
Oh, and the other thing that I know is that in the article, it talked about Aunt Code keeping a journal. And wouldn't it be awesome if we could find that?
yeah.
But
We
people
don't
don't
have
keep those things. They keep them for a while and then pitch them.
And the house was
or
cleaned
whatever.
out, it went to the dog park.
Probably, yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Well, she
Like a lot of
stayed,
things.
she stayed with us for a while.
Yeah.
But then Mother felt that she couldn't quite handle it. I think
Yeah.
probably she was probably dementia.
Yeah.
And Mom
Yeah.
had young children.
Yeah.
So she went back home with Uncle Howard.
Yeah.
and he hired some woman to come in and take care of her.
Okay, the projector's tired.
Yeah.
The projector has
She's
said
toasty.
It's done, or I've unplugged it or something. I don't think.
Probably just over hot.
I did do DNA, and I haven't I sent a text to her, but I haven't heard back from one of Dora's children,
That's what I
grandchildren.
was wondering to see
yeah.
if any of them, since they.
Yeah, I matched a couple of them, and,
Right.
Oh, really?
yeah, that have tested, but they haven't answered me. One's in Florida.
I know the oldest girl in
He needs
yeah, Florida.
Yep.
And their last name was McIntyre.
Yep.
And mother was never able to keep in touch with the kids. She always wondered where the kids went. And when my son was playing ball, and
Yeah.
we went through,
That lived, the house
what
lived
they were
right
there,
across from
Massachusetts.
Staples.
I don't think Diane.
I remember you telling me about
We went through the town, and they had,
Yeah, to the house.
Yep.
and there was a restaurant, that signed McIntyre's Restaurant.
That old.
I
And
bet that was theirs.
And it probably was, and why I didn't stop and go in and say, you know,
Yep, we could be related.
yeah, and I've always regretted that I didn't because it would have pleased my mother so much. But as I was saying, you know, there are lots of things we regret that
Yep.
we haven't done in life,
Yep.
and you just can't dwell on it.
That's
I
right.
wish we'd talked more about her trip.
Yeah,
You know, I mean, she would occasionally say something, but not much.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed that just kind of clicked with me was the amount they spent for oil.
Yeah.
Because when my parents took their honeymoon trip in '38, every single time Dad gassed up, he put oil in the car.
Yeah.
And that did not look like they were putting oil in every time, so it must be that dependable Dodge.
Right?